Patel for being here today. I have a couple of questions regarding a terrible shooting that occurred in Colorado, a state, as you may know, that I represent. You've testified previously about, I think, what you would describe as your efforts to provide more information regarding the investigation with respect to the horrific assassination of Mr. Kirk. And so, in that same vein, I'm hoping you can provide this committee and my constituents in Colorado with some clarity.
Absolutely.
I think, as my colleagues know, in Evergreen, Colorado, Jefferson County, a county that I proudly represent, at Evergreen High School, a shooter ultimately injured. 2 students were praying for their swift recovery. There's an article here from Colorado Public Radio. The title is, quote, FBI was already investigating an account that may have been linked to the Evergreen shooter. You're familiar with the circumstances generally, Director, regarding this terrible tragedy.
Yes.
So my understanding from the public reporting is that an organization reported to the FBI in July of this year regarding, just reading here from the article, that the FBI opened an assessment into a social media account user whose identity was unknown and who was discussing the planning of a mass shooting with threats nonspecific in nature. This is the FBI's statement to the press. And that the FBI continued to work this assessment investigation to identify the name and location of the user up until September 10th, 2025, which was the day of the tragedy. Can you provide us some clarity on what were the impediments to finding, the account user, and maybe describe in greater detail the FBI's work in that regard?
Generally speaking, yes, because I know even though the shooter's deceased, the investigation we're not done.
Sure.
And so the impediments to finding these individuals, and you highlight a great point.
The conversation started serious enough: a school shooting investigation, FBI protocols, and public safety concerns. But what happened next in this congressional hearing took an unexpected turn that has everyone talking. The representative from Colorado, after discussing the tragic Evergreen High School shooting, shifted gears completely. He pulled out a periodic transaction report, a financial disclosure document that FBI Director Kash Patel filed in July. And this is where things got interesting. What exactly did this report reveal? According to the disclosure, Director Patel divested over $100,000 from various stocks, presumably to avoid conflicts of interest in his new role. Standard procedure for high-ranking officials, right? But here's the catch. On the same report, there were 2 new purchases listed, between $15,000 and $50,000 in a national coffeehouse chain, and between $50,000 and $100,000 in a semiconductor company. Both transactions made in May, just weeks into his tenure as FBI director. Now, you might be thinking, so what? Don't people invest all the time? And you'd be right. But we're not talking about just anyone. We're talking about the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the most powerful law enforcement agency in the country. Someone who has access to classified information, ongoing investigations, and intelligence that could potentially move markets. The representative made it clear this wasn't meant as a gotcha question. But let's be honest, was this really just a friendly inquiry? The timing here is crucial. The question came right after discussing a national tragedy, almost as if to catch the director off guard. Director Patel's response was straightforward. He explained that before making any trades, he submits proposals to the Department of Justice. They review it, the FBI reviews it, and only then does he execute the transaction. He mentioned he's been trading stocks like most people, follows certain industries, and thought these would be good investments. But does that explanation really address the core concern? The representative pressed further, pointing out that Patel had divested from other companies, not all of which were actual conflicts, but to avoid the appearance of impropriety. So why make new purchases at all? Why not just avoid the entire situation? And here's where the representative made his real point. He's been leading a bipartisan effort for years to ban members of Congress and senior executive officials from trading individual stocks altogether, Republicans and Democrats working together on this issue. His suggestion to Director Patel was simple. Consider divesting entirely. Stop day trading. avoid even the appearance of a conflict. Do you think that's a reasonable request? Think about it from both perspectives. On one hand, Director Patel followed the proper procedures. He got approval before making trades. He's transparent about his investments through required disclosures. He's not doing anything illegal. On the other hand, the FBI director has extraordinary access to information. Even with approval processes, can we ever truly eliminate the perception of insider advantage? This exchange highlights a broader debate that's been raging in Washington for years. Should government officials be allowed to trade stocks at all? Some argue it's a fundamental right. These are personal investments, often made through brokers, and officials need to be able to manage their financial futures. Others argue the potential for conflicts of interest is simply too great, especially for those in positions of immense power and access to sensitive information. In my opinion, the representative's question was fair. What do you think? The representative wasn't accusing Director Patel of wrongdoing. He was raising a legitimate concern about optics and public trust. When the head of the FBI is making stock trades, even approved ones, it creates questions. Questions about access to information, questions about potential conflicts, questions about whether justice is truly blind or if those at the top play by different rules. Director Patel's final response was diplomatic. He simply said, "I'll work with you on it." No commitment to stop trading, no defensive pushback, just an acknowledgement that he's willing to have the conversation. Was that response enough? Here's what makes this particularly relevant right now. This isn't just about one person's stock portfolio. This is about systemic issues in how our government officials interact with financial markets. Members of Congress have been caught making suspiciously timed trades for years. Senators have purchased and sold stocks right before major policy announcements. Cabinet members have maintained investments in industries they regulate. The representative mentioned he's been working on bipartisan legislation to address this. That's significant. In today's polarized political environment, finding common ground on anything is rare. The fact that both parties recognize this as a problem tells you something about how serious the issue has become. But will anything actually change? That's the million-dollar question, or in this case, the $50,000 to $100,000 question. Talk is cheap in Washington. Hearings happen, concerns are raised, promises are made, and then nothing. The system continues as it always has. Officials keep trading, the public keeps questioning, and trust in government keeps eroding. Director Patel's situation is unique because of his specific role. The FBI investigates financial crimes, corporate fraud, and insider trading. The irony of the FBI director actively trading stocks while his agency prosecutes others for similar behavior isn't lost on anyone. Even if everything he's doing is legal and approved, the optics are problematic. Do you think this undermines public confidence in the FBI? Consider the average American watching this exchange. They see a powerful official making substantial stock trades while leading an agency that's supposed to be above reproach. They hear about approval processes and ethics reviews, but they also remember countless scandals where the proper procedures weren't enough to prevent abuse. The representative's approach was measured and respectful. He prefaced his question by saying it wasn't a gotcha. He acknowledged the disclosures were properly filed. He simply suggested that maybe, just maybe, the director of the FBI should hold himself to a higher standard than the minimum legal requirement. That was a strong response. Do you agree? Because that's really what this comes down to. Not what's legal, not what's approved, but what's right. What maintains public trust. What ensures that the American people can look at their law enforcement leaders and believe, without question, that they're serving the public interest and nothing else. The hearing moved on after this exchange. Other questions were asked, other topics were covered. But this moment captured something important about the ongoing tension between personal financial freedom and public service responsibility. As this debate continues in Congress, as legislation is proposed and potentially passed, we'll see whether officials like Director Patel voluntarily choose to divest entirely or whether they'll continue to operate within the current system, following the rules as they exist today. What do you think the right answer is? Should we demand more from our public servants? Should we accept that they're entitled to manage their personal finances like anyone else? Or is there a middle ground that protects both individual rights and public trust? These are the questions that this brief exchange raises. Questions that go far beyond one director's stock portfolio. Questions about power, accountability, and the price of public service in America today.